Hello, my brother. Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Way back in 2015, I posted a video to YouTube that seems to be getting a bit of a resurgence this week. And the video was called Why You Should Stop Watching the News. And it's like this 2-minute video that I'm seeing is getting a lot more view count this week, and people are commenting on it today, even though it was released 5 years ago. And at the very beginning of the video, I ask a very simple question that I'll ask you. Who is the unhappiest person that you know? Just think about who this person might be. Like, who has the crappiest outlook on life? Like, think about one person that you know. You have that person in your mind? Well, I probably know something that's true about that person, which is that person watches the news, and probably lots of it. Now, back in 2015, 5 years ago, at that time, the negative news cycle, the negative to positive news ratio was 17 negative stories to one positive story. That was 5 years ago. That was a different presidential administration. That was way before the COVID era. Can you imagine what the ratio of negative news stories is to positive news stories today? And we are consuming more news than ever before. Do you think that might have an impact on your overall well-being day to day? One of the things that I have seen over these last few weeks in running webinars for a number of different companies and polling over 1,000 people now about what's the one word that best describes how they're feeling, the one word that rises to the top is anxious. Anxious and anxiety comes from fear of the future, fear of uncertainty, fear of the unknown, fear of not knowing when this thing is going to end, or is it going to go back to normal, or are we going to be healthy, are we going to be are things ever going to be the same again? There's a lot of unknown, and there's a lot to be potentially afraid about because of those unknowns in the future, which brings anxiety into the present moment. But one of the problems that I have seen emerging from that is that when we don't know about the future, we don't have the answers, some people spring unconsciously into an overabundance of information consumption to try and seek and find the answer that is going to make them feel more comfortable. And so there's a nonstop fire hosing of receiving information, reading every last blog post or every podcast or every news cycle and a breaking news story that comes out to try and find the thing that is finally going to make you say, I can breathe again. But in the process of doing that, I'm seeing more and more people over-consuming, which confuses themselves, and then that creates even more anxiety. It amplifies the problem to begin with. So what I want to do here is I want to give you two things today. Very simple. Number one, I want to give you an information consumption protocol regarding how you're going to intake the news. This was something that Brian and I laid out 4 weeks ago in our very first daily podcast when we entered this COVID era that I have used over the past 4 weeks that has been a game changer for me so that I can feel informed, but I still reject about 99% of the information that comes my way because I don't need to know every last bit of information. I just need to know enough about what keeps me safe. So I'll hit that in a second. And the second thing that I want to invite you to potentially participate in is doing a 1-week abstinence period from reading or watching the news. That seems kind of crazy during a time like this, doesn't it? But if you are someone who's starting to feel like, you know what, I'm consuming more and more news, more and more information. I certainly don't feel any better. I don't think I'm any more prepared than I was a few days ago or a few weeks ago. Well, then maybe news and the consumption of it is the problem. What if you were to turn off the spigot for just a week to test it out? What about 48 hours if a week seems too daunting? And maybe put someone that you trust on point to say, hey, if there's some breaking news over the next 48 hours that if I were to miss it, I would die, will you tell me? And chances are nothing like that's going to happen, but at least you have someone set up to make sure you get the information. Test it out. See how you would feel. Because right now, I think more news, too much news is the problem versus not enough information. I'm seeing way too many people over-informed, and it's actually not contributing to well-being. So 4 weeks ago, I devised a 4-part information consumption plan. It has steered me really well. Here's what they are for me, and then I would encourage you to either follow these if these feel good for you or devise your own. Number 1, I will not consume any news for the first 60 minutes of the day. And for me, I actually said all content in general. I'm not consuming any books. I'm not consuming any outside information for the first 60 minutes of most days so that I can fortify my inner foundation, whether it's through breath work, meditation, just taking a walk, not doing anything, allowing myself to get really clear and focused on how I want to show up that day, getting creative, writing, journaling. For the first 60 minutes, there's an endless amount of stuff that I can do that does not involve the outside world shoving stuff down my throat. So that's number 1. I will not consume any content for the first 60 minutes of the day. Number 2, I will carefully select the sources of information that I trust. Now, we've all known the stories of that telephone game of, hey, here's a chart that someone put out, or here's my aunt's uncle's niece's nephew's cousin's husband is a doctor at this place who told me about this coronavirus cure, or here's what's going to be happening in 5 days from now. And we're taking in way too much information that's not substantiated, that's not sourced appropriately. If you have not built some parameters around which sources of information that you trust, whether it's a certain doctor, whether it's a podcaster, whether it's a news source, a media outlet, if you haven't consciously chosen that and you're just clicking on every link that someone sends to you, you're setting yourself up for more anxiety and confusion. So I will carefully select the sources that I trust. Number 3, I will turn off all non-essential notifications on all of my devices. Most people have a ton of notifications that social media notifications, breaking news notifications, that over the course of the day, when you're trying to do your work, it's just like one interruption after another. Not only does it take you out of your work, but half the time, 90% of the time, those interruptions, that breaking news is irrelevant. It's inconsequential. It's something you probably didn't need to know. And yet those are the things that are causing you to distract your focus from the most important stuff that you're supposed to be showing up and doing, the responsibilities that you have for yourself and for others. So I've turned off all non-essential notifications. And when I teach my clients this, I would say essential notifications would be text messages, emails, phone calls, voicemails. And when we're traveling, flight apps for flight changes, but that's not really a reality for most people right now. I only have a notification for phone calls that come in. That's the only thing that sets my phone off. I don't have anything for text messages or emails. I check every half hour or hour. I've never missed anything. Never missed anything that was so urgent that a half an hour check-in just lost the deal or missed out on something. People know how to call me. And then finally, number 4, I will limit the number of times I check the news to 2 or 3 times a day. So after my morning routine in the morning, maybe after the first hour or 2 hours, I'll gently start to check in on the news. And I have 2 emails that the New York Times sends me in the morning that I'll go to my inbox and I'll read. It's basically the New York Times general update, and then there's a New York City update. So I know what's going on globally and locally. That's it. And then maybe I'll check in during the day, midday, I'll turn on channel 1, which is New York local news. And at the end of the night, I may look at something international. That's it. 3 times a day, and I'm done. And for me, I've been informed, I've been healthy, I've been safe, and I feel like I've got command of my inner state of being. Not every day have I been perfect. I haven't felt lit up and energized every single day. Actually, the last few days, I've hit I would probably say the biggest dip that I've felt over the last 4 weeks. But it really hasn't been coronavirus related. It's just the natural ebb and flows of life. Can't be on fire forever. Our feelings transition. But what I can tell you for sure is that the way that I've been consuming the news and the way that I've been keeping myself informed allows me to feel not only confident about my health and the safety of the people that I care about, but it also allows me to stay in a place of connected to my power source, strong on the inside, confident on the inside, knowing that I've got enough information and not an ounce more. So I would encourage you, as the two takeaways to this conversation would be, devise your own information consumption plan if you haven't already. And you can borrow my 4 steps. And then number 2, do a temporary abstinence period from news and just kind of give yourself a check-in to see, is it helpful for the next 48 hours not to consume any news, for the next week? And if your work is such that like there's certain information, there's certain news that you need to consume, well then do that, but then like kind of see if you can put a guardrails on everything else and see what that does for your overall mental and emotional well-being. You may find yourself anxious and gripping for more knowledge, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be going back. It just means that maybe like you're overly conditioned to checking and there's a habit that needs to be broken, drifting that needs to be interrupted, so that you can take command of the information that you are consuming, because that is what the great man within would do. One of the quirky things about Apple Podcasts is that I actually can't see the ratings and reviews that were left for the Great Man Within podcast if you are outside of the country. I actually have to go to a separate website, which is called chartable.com, where I can see all of the global reviews that we've received. And I'd like to read you one from Ida Marie from Denmark that says, "Thank you so much for the podcast and your valuable work. Listening to Dominic and Brian reminds me of the kind of masculine I want in my life, and also how to make the masculine side of me thrive. It warms my heart to see what awesome space they create for all the men out there, and it's quite interesting to be a fly on the wall. I'm so grateful for the insights and reflections you both bring into my life and how you inspire me to grow, create, contribute, and make me believe in my dreams and ambitions. Keep up the amazing work." And Ida Marie, if you're listening, I know that you emailed us as well. So thank you so much for these beautiful words. And as you know, the show is geared towards men, but we do have a healthy following of women. And in fact, women are the ones who are promoting this work the most. I'm finding that most guys have found out about this podcast because it's either a buddy of theirs, but more often a woman in their lives has put this in their hands. So I would encourage you, if you are a woman who's listening to the show, hand this off to a man in your life that you care about. And fellas, can we please stop letting our women in our lives doing all the hard work? Let us be the ones who are opening up other guys in our lives doing this inner work. So please, if you know a man, put this podcast in their hands, invite them to listen to some of your favorite episodes so they too can discover and live the great man within them.